Welcome, everyone, to RB1 Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Fake Teams Podcast channel. I am your humble host, constant doubter of Alvin Kamara, and would kindly like you to wear a mask so we can all watch Cam Newton remind the NFL just how good he is, Pete Rogers. And I am joined by some of the guys. We have resident old man, the Duck father, and recovering fan of the no longer worsened team name in the NFL, Houston Texans, Clark Barnes, and Captain Woke himself, the ginger, nicely trimmed man, and thinks your favorite team is run by donkeys, Nick Bodiford. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
I don't think the woke group likes me too much, but I'm doing well, Pete. How are you?
The woke group turned on you real fast, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, how are you?
I am good.
Good.
I am recovering from a full day of trash Twitter takes, ranging from comparing COVID cases to car crashes, to saying people were tougher during World War II, people rooting for COVID to take down the NFL season. And my new favorite take, sports need to go on because the country needs a win / positive news / whatever. So you can fuck that all the way to the sun and back. Yeah, I'm exhausted. It's been a big Twitter day.
Yeah, I got a lot of flack from the bitter Washington fan base when we had that exchange on the Schefter post. And
yeah, so Schefter,
I think this is 50 people come after me.
Yeah, Schefter, back when Washington announced that they'll be the Washington football team for the year, Nick was like, yeah, this is what I've, and all of us, like all the fake teams has been calling them the Washington football team for the last 2 years. An innocuous statement, one would assume. And yet Twitter attacked the Captain Woke Nick. And today Twitter went absolutely in an uproar because the Marlins are dealing with a full-blown COVID outbreak and baseball is doing nothing to stop it or to hit the pause on them. So anyways, yeah, a lot of takes going on out there in the world.
I pulled weeds in 2 gardens and put down a bed of mulch. It was great.
You had a much better day than I did. It's days like today where I am just like, I at some point in my life fairly soon would love to just be able to like delete Twitter. It's hard.
Twitter's not important. I have
hard when your job is that, but
I have stopped using it a lot. And the only reason I'm on it still is this podcast. Like, I don't know what happened to all the cute dog and cat pictures that I used to get all the time. Now it's just assholes talking out of their assholes about asshole stuff. No, don't care for it much anymore.
I think that's a good motto for Twitter. I think Twitter should adopt that. Assholes talking about assholes out of their assholes.
And like, I've muted tons of people to just get the dog and cat pictures, and somehow it's still not working.
People still crop up. No, Twitter is becoming a dark place to operate, and it's not a lot of fun when that's 50% of my job. But
fortunately, we actually have like real fantasy football stuff to talk about.
There is news upon news. So we're going to get to that. Nick has a big old piece dropping on Fake Teams Tuesday, which is today as you're listening to this, his top 100 players for the 2020 fantasy season. So we are going to make our way through that and pick it apart. But first, of course, the news. News that broke this weekend, Seahawks blockbuster trade. Not a lot of fantasy relevance here unless you play in a defense league or whatever those are called. IDP, is that it? Did I just pull it out of my
Nailed
butt?
it, Pete. Yeah.
Yes. God, I'm so good. Seahawks traded Bradley Mcdougall, a first-round pick and a third-round pick in 2021 and a 2022 first-round pick to the Jets for safety Jamal Adams. Nick, I know you must be feeling good about this since now Pete Carroll can't draft a running back or an off-ball linebacker in the first round for the next 2 years.
Yeah, the history of shipping away big hauls for defensive players has really not worked out in recent years. And as the nerds say, it's because defense is not sticky. It's a really challenging thing to being good on defense is a really challenging thing to replicate year over year, even with a consistent nucleus. John Schneider's philosophy, he's made it really clear. His thing is, if you can find someone who is technically worth a first round pick, then trade one or more away to get them because it's better than what you might miss on in the draft. there's some merit to it. Like, I don't know that giving up a first for Jimmy Graham in his prime or for Percy Harvin in his prime is a bad thing per se, but those are offensive players. And also you have to then use them correctly, which is sort of the bane of Seattle's existence. But anyway, yeah, the Jamal Adams signing, they'll have a good secondary. They won't have a good pass rush. They might get buoyed by Jamal Adams' play, and it'll further extend Pete Carroll's just almost there lifestyle. And I don't know. I mean, they'll keep having bad drafts. It'll catch up to them eventually. Just hopefully it's sooner than later.
Such positive words from our resident Seahawks fan.
Yeah, Russell Wilson quickly becoming the Andre Johnson of quarterbacks. Thanks, Pete Carroll. I appreciate that.
Ooh, I like that.
That's perfect.
That is a very good comparison. That is a very good. Well done, Clark. Well done there. Well done. I personally am very happy to see Jamal Adams and all of his talent leave the AFC East. So I'm here for this trade.
To leave the Jets to go to the Seahawks. Good for him. Like,
that's
regardless of the trade, good for old Jamal Adams.
I mean, honestly, I think this is a win for everyone involved, especially
just imagine you work in New Jersey for a dysfunctional company, and then you get to go out to the West Coast to some tech company who, they haven't had any hits in a few years, but the CEO's cool. Like, that's nice. You know,
that's a win. That's a win. And for the Jets, getting 2 first-round picks for a player who vocalized, was basically like, "I'm not staying. I want to get out." Pretty good haul. Wins all around. A win-win-win situation, in the words of Michael Scott. In actual 2020 NFL season news, the NFL and the NFLPA have agreed to no preseason games to start the year. So, Clark, does this change how you're approaching fantasy drafts at all, knowing we won't have games to watch people play, nor coaches have games to kind of rebalance their depth chart?
Well, it's kind of a tough question. So, like, no, it doesn't change any philosophy or anything, but yes, it's going to change. We miss all of those second halves for rookies that we're trying to keep an eye on and things like that. So now we're just guessing about more stuff. But that's okay. The rules are the same for everyone. It's all a huge guess anyway. So this is just one additional layer of guess. We won't have preseason to throw us off, but we won't have preseason to tip us off either. So I'm kind of neutral on it. Preseason, I'm excited for it every year just because it's football, but then about by the 3rd or 4th game, you're kind of remember why you don't like the preseason.
Why the preseason is stupid.
Yeah.
Preseason, it's a grind, but I think it's a huge separator in terms of who grinds and who doesn't. I personally always like to try to draft even before preseason because, like, by week 3 or 4, anybody who's not worked hard trying to figure out what they're, who they're going to target and stuff, can just log on to like ESPN, and Matthew Berry will just tell them who won the camp battles, and that's that. It takes a lot more work to try to predict that and call that accurately. So I like to try to draft earlier. I think it rewards hard work.
Yeah.
But this year with no preseason, hey, now we can draft at any point in time. And if you are a grinder, then you have a massive upside. So, but all of us, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, the worst thing every NFL season for me is just starting to look at ADP in like February and March and it's being blown away. And just knowing that you're going to have the best team fantasy football has ever seen. And then August turns around and like everyone in the world is turned on to the like, why did we have T.Y. Hilton way down there? That's stupid. And you're like, you're getting him in the 6th round and all that stuff vanishes. So I like that point, Nick. Maybe that won't happen quite so horribly this year.
I do know for me personally, I think given just how weird this offseason is, with no preseason, with training camps not even starting yet, and things having such a delay, and they're being seemingly or going to be a real barrier for anyone who's switching teams, anyone who's new to teams, that whole 9 yards in terms of like getting on the same page in offensive wise. For me personally, I think it's just going to make I'm going to probably prioritize, not drastically, but players who've been in a situation for a couple of seasons, or us, I know what I'm getting, as opposed to like, I think rookies, I'm probably going to be, especially in redraft leagues, obviously rookies, I'm going to be a little bit cooler on than maybe I would in a normal season. Cause like if we came out and through 4 preseason games, watch Clyde Edwards-Helaire just like ball out, everyone's like, okay, draft him like he is going to be an RB1 with KC. This year, it's like we don't really know what his role is going to be. Andy Reid doesn't really do a workhorse back, yada, yada, yada. So I think it's going to be, I'm probably good. Where I'll see the change or the impact that'll have will be in like not looking at kind of stable players who I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah, I'll touch on that with one of the guys that we talk about later. I think that can cut both ways. And, I used to be a risk analyst, so everything is a risk assessment and evaluation. Like everyone has value at a certain point. That may be more exaggerated this year. And Pete, I'm with you. I'm kind of tipping the scales towards stable situations, but the unknown can be really rewarding. And after about the third or fourth round, there's always a lot of unknowns anyway. So I don't know. It's going to be a fun year to draft.
Well, there is some other rookie news. Today, Justin Jefferson for the Vikings and Keyshawn Vaughn for the Bucs were both placed on their respective COVID IR lists, which doesn't mean that they have tested positive for COVID, but it means that they might have, or that they've been in contact with people who have tested positive. So something to monitor as we move into the NFL season and as you're moving into drafts. That again, like ultimately, we have not seen, ultimately COVID has not had a super massive impact on players in the sense that in what we've seen nationwide. However, we don't necessarily know the side effects and how long side effects have lasted. We've heard Von Miller talk about it. We've heard Ezekiel Elliott, both of whom have had COVID, talk about the kind of residual side effects that they've been dealing with. So again, hoping for a speedy and full recovery to both of them if they do have COVID, but something to look at as you're approaching drafts. Particularly a bummer for my Keyshawn Vaughn hype train, since there's now reports that Ronald Jones is going to be their starting back in week 1. And God damn it, if I'm going to now convince myself to draft Ronald Jones in the late rounds.
Yeah, so just what I'll say is tune in here because I will obsess over the COVID progress reports. This now falls under the injury news. So if anybody's chirping about their lungs being scarred and that kind of thing, I'll try to have that ready.
This came out last week, but I want to touch on it briefly. Sean McVay says that the Rams will adopt the 49ers running back strategy in 2020, basically giving Kyle Shanahan a big old hug and saying, "Great job, Kyle. We're going to do it too."
What strategy? Starting healthy running backs? That was the 49er strategy last year.
Well, he says they're going to have an open-minded approach. We're going to be committed to trying to have some balance, and then we'll go to the hot hand whenever it really expresses themselves in deserving carries.
All right.
Clearly, Clark is going to be drafting everyone in the Rams' backfield.
Sean McVay says he's not going to be stupid this season. Oh, that's great, guys. That's great. You're going to look at your players and decide who's playing the best. It's great. Great news. I have more on the Rams later, actually, too.
Yeah, so do I. So, yeah. I'll keep it shut for now.
All right, Pete, I'm not hating on you, but I know someone wrote that story and someone's editor was like, "Oh, this is very good, Nikki. That's very good." God, it's the off.
Come on, Nikki, make a better article next time. Get a real scoop.
Nick. I didn't mean you, Steve. There we go.
Get a real scoop.
Good work,
next
Steve.
time, Steve.
So Sean McVay says he'll evaluate talent. Oh, this is a burner. Okay.
I think I need to start just throwing in one of these news bulletins each week just to have Clark go on a rampage. It's incredible.
So I do think that the point of that is basically he's not going to commit to a lead back.
Basically, Cam Akers is value is just getting depressed.
Yes, which
we'll see.
Foreshadowing to what we'll be talking about here.
Saucy. All right, finally in the news, the NFL's Top 100 is coming out, which somehow is getting people fired up even amidst the actual other shit that's going on in the world right now, including Keenan Allen, who is not pleased when he was ranked 77th on the list. He took to Twitter saying that he was the best wide receiver in the AFC West ahead of Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. Clark, you're our tape grinder on the show. Is he right?
Keenan Allen is very good. I think he's probably the best route runner out of all of those guys. I wouldn't draft him first, but he'd probably be right behind Mike Evans for me because I don't like to draft people who beat the shit out of their significant others.
It's a fair rule to have when drafting, Clark.
Who's that?
Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yep. So just to clarify, Pete, did he was he saying that AFC as a whole?
No, AFC West.
AFC West. Okay. I thought I heard you say Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and
I did say.
Yeah, he did say that. He tweeted that out, but then also said the AFC West.
Okay. So anyway, he's a terrific
good
route
point.
runner.
Good point. I totally took it. I was like, yeah, they're in the AFC West. It's like,
Yeah,
no, they're in the NFC
Don't ask me
South.
questions.
They're in Tampa Bay. That's about as far away from the West as possible.
I can't recall who it was. It was either Robert Mays or Kevin Clark on an episode of the Ringer NFL show like a year or two ago. But they one of them recounted a story of asking Keenan Allen what he thinks about pre-snap, and he thought it was going to be like one or two things, and he rattled off a checklist of like 16 things that he goes through before every snap. And so I think his claim, you guys are right. He might be right. Unfortunately, the Chargers have been a team that refuses to look at anything analytically, and so they just get into these passing game scripts. But they get into situations where it's hard to run because they know they're going to run, and it's hard to pass because they know they're going to pass. Anyway, talked about this a ton. Good for Keenan.
Yeah. Possibly hot take. This is a hill that I've recently started building a house on. I am not sold that Tyreek Hill is like that phenomenal a wide receiver. I feel like if you took away or gave Tyreek Hill average or maybe slightly above average NFL speed, that he wouldn't be like a surefire top 5, top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Am I wrong? Am I crazy?
But he
does have it. No, I understand. But like, I feel like if you're talking about like, yeah, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, I guess I have seen him a lot crop up in these like top 5 wide receivers in the NFL, and he's in that list. And to me, it's like, I don't think he belongs there because I don't think that he's not as good as Julio, obviously. He's not as good as DeAndre. He's not as good as Devontae. He's not as good as, I don't know, Amari, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin.
Well, so if I could play psychologist here, Pete.
Yeah,
it's okay to talk about someone as an NFL player and dislike that person as a human being. And I think Tyreek Hill is probably about 5th or 6th as far as like top wide receivers in the NFL because he is so fast and he's strong enough to get open. And unlike a couple of fast guys who've had good seasons, he's done it for 2-3 years in a row now. And he is faster than everyone else in the league and playing with a really ballsy, big-armed quarterback. And so that is a real tough combo to beat.
Clark, doing an excellent job cutting to the core of why I can't have Tyreek Hill in my top 5 wide receivers in the NFL.
I won't argue against you, but he's up there.
That's fair.
Yeah, there probably is not an argument to be made that he is a top 5 technician. I think he probably is a top 5, just like what he can do as a receiver on the field. Yeah, I think he is top 5. And I was really reticent. That was a hill that I kind of died on. I was really reticent. One, from what you mentioned earlier, Clark, he's not a person I wanted to root for, but I was also skeptical about this guy who had like no receiving profile in college, suddenly making it in the league. And what he's done is he took his intense natural ability and he's built his game on it, and it's like impossible to stop. Mahomes helps.
Yeah. Having the best quarterback in the NFL is like pretty helpful. Yeah. No, I'm glad I didn't finish the house on this hill. I'll just leave the kind of outlines, the abandoned wreckage.
You got to do you, Pete. Be contrarian.
I'll do my best. All right. Well, perfect segue. As the NFL is doing their top 100s, Nick has done his top 100s. And so we are going to dive into that. And like I said, check fake teams. We're not going to list every single player that's in Nick's. We're just going to kind of bounce from groups of 10 and talk about players who interest us and things we want Nick to defend with his life and soul. If you want the whole top 100 players for 2020 fantasy football, make sure to go check fake teams today, Tuesday, when you're listening to this. We will get to that, but first, a quick ad break. All right, we are back and cue the trumpets. It is time for the top 100 players of 2020 fantasy football as given to you by Nicholas Bodiford. Nick, do you have any words of wisdom or general themes or things that you want to touch on before we delve into this?
Sure. First off, looking at the list now, I already have changes that I want to make. I was thinking of things earlier, like today after I set this out, and I was like, oh man, I got to tinker with this and that. There was one oversight that I hope you guys just didn't even notice.
There's always one. I left Julio Jones out of my ranks one year.
Oh my God.
Just totally forgot
that he existed.
That's like, I think that's almost as bad as Heath 2 years ago starting his rankings with Kareem Hunt as the RB 42. Anyway, I think that the thing to understand, and I take, I talk all the dudes that established the run are brilliant, and the way that they do their ADPs is they put guys in a position where their drafters will take a player. And so I might not necessarily think that a certain player is like the 10th best running back in the league or whatever. But if I think that for fantasy purposes, he's going to produce in that regard, I'm going to put him ahead of his ADP so folks get him. So just, while you're viewing, keep that in mind.
Are these PPR standard or half point PPR?
I had half point in mind. I figured we'd just split the baby and go half point.
Dibs the top half of the baby. I want the cute face, not the butt that poops. Have fun with that, Clark.
One thing I'll say is thank you for putting together the list, Nick. People that consume this stuff and critique this stuff, it's a hell of a lot easier to look at someone's list and pick it apart and say where you think that they're wrong than it is to put one together. I usually do this and have just been woefully behind. I got to like 25 this year, so Nick really stepped up to give us his top 100. And lists like this and conversations like this should spark thoughts for how you're going to handle your draft, not make you mad that somebody didn't rank your guy higher. So if you disagree, tweet us and tell us why. That'd be
Amen.
Nice.
Amen.
Yeah,
Clark,
thanks,
why don't you
Clark.
start us? Let's start 1 to 10. Hit us up. We're going to start right at the top. Clark, where do you want to lead the discussion to begin with?
So I want to start with an overall trend that I'm seeing this year, and that's the return to running back just like absolutely dominating the first round. And that's for good reason, right? Running backs had a really good year last year. The only really dominant wide receiver performance we had was Michael Thomas. And we had a lot of running backs perform at the higher end of what we expected from guys who could have been workhorse backs. So that's all we remember. That's fresh in our minds. And the guy I want to talk about specifically that makes that point is a guy that's kind of at my tier break, and Nick has Miles Sanders at number 6. So Miles Sanders looks like the only guy in town in Philadelphia. He is super quick and had a couple of really good games last year to close out the season. So there's good reason to think that he's going to be a workhorse back. He can catch. He can do everything. The Eagles are an explosive offense. But that's when I start to see enough warts in the running backs to split and go to wide receiver. So Miles Sanders is more Alvin Kamara size than he is Ezekiel Elliott size. Doug Marrone said last year, or showed last year that he would, or Doug Peterson showed last year that he would rather play a boring running back like Jordan Howard over Miles Sanders. And maybe that's just because Sanders was a rookie, but it seems like really creative play callers don't really necessarily want the most athletic person to be their running back. Even if that seems like the right decision to us, it might not turn out to be that way. So Sanders could be an absolute league winner, or he could do about what he did last year. Since he played all 16 games, he finished as the RB16, but those are a lot of like counting stats kind of accumulations. He had about 4 or 5 good games you would have been really proud of to start. So that's kind of my tier break. That's kind of what I think about Miles Sanders. Pete, what say you?
Yeah, I think that, and Nick, it was good that you gave us this kind of preface at the forefront of this. Miles Sanders to me is a guy who I think has exactly where you have him, RB6 potential and maybe even slightly above. But looking at when I first looked at it, I was like, God, that feels rich for Miles Sanders. And there are question marks around the Eagles, and Devonta Freeman is still out there. He just got a new agent, and Doug Peterson is just dying to go out and sign him and just shut down and crush everyone's hopes and dreams about what Miles Sanders could be as a workhorse in this backfield. But yeah, I don't like, I totally buy into the Miles Sanders hype, but I couldn't help myself looking at this and being like, oof, God, that is a little rich. So Nick, clearly I know you said you were drafting kind of where you think that they could ultimately finish, but you think that the RB6 spot for Miles Sanders is worth it.
Well, yeah. And so it really comes down to the context of what is available to us. And as I've said before on the show, the wide receiver position is outrageously deep. We're talking, my favorite guy to draft is Will Fuller. And if I'm getting him, who I think can be a wide receiver 1 this year in the 6th round, I'm going to punt that position as far down the board. Now, conversely, the running back position is super shallow. Like, it really falls off a cliff into this shaky running back 2 territory, and then into an area that is like, there are a lot of guys that I just don't even want on my team. I don't want Le'Veon Bell on my team. I don't want Leonard Fournette on my team. What I see with Miles Sanders, and I talked about this of course, is the Sharp Football strength of schedule metrics have them facing the 9th softest slate of run defenses, the 10th softest slate of pass defenses, and the big thing that they have different with their offense is they now have 4 capable deep threats. Okay, Goodwin, Deshaun Jackson, Hightower, and Jalen Reagor. This is just an aspect of the offense where that they haven't had in the Wentz era, and defenses have been able to just crowd the line and stop all the short to intermediate stuff. So I think that overall, playing a very easy schedule-wise or defense-wise, an easy schedule with guys who can actually stretch the field is going to change the makeup of what happens around the line of scrimmage quite a bit. And I think depending on who you read, there are a lot of different opinions about what it is Doug Peterson wants. Does he want a committee, or does he actually want a bell cow? And by bell cow, as I stated in the piece, we're looking for a guy who's getting over 18 touches a game, probably in the 18 to 22. And from what I read, from what I hear, and this is sort of like, well, I think this reporter's smart and I think this reporter's dumb kind of a thing, is what Peterson wants is a workhorse back that he puts out there, and he doesn't have to worry about what they can and can't do. Like when I guess it's I have images. Was DeMarco Murray, was he Chip Kelly when they just had him running stretches? So I mean, I just have that locked into my mind. But anyway, I think that the offense itself is going to look a lot different, and I do believe that Peterson wants a guy that they can have out there as a workhorse. And the Devonta Freeman thing, I mean, maybe they sign him. I don't know. I've been so down on him.
I have no idea if they're going to. It just terrifies me when there's a running back on the free agent market that, like, it feels like everyone's like, well, the Eagles could use a running back. And it's like, no, God, please let Miles Sanders be Miles Sanders.
The tough thing is, like, are people saying that because they think Peterson wants a committee, or because they think that they need someone? Because I'm really high on Boston Scott. Boston Scott is in my top 100. He's like I don't even want to say he's not a poor man's version of Sanders. He's a very similar back to Sanders. And to me, it's like, if they can run Sanders out there for 20 touches and give Scott 8 to 10, and it doesn't change the look of their offense at all, this seems like a dream scenario for me. Anyway,
yeah,
that's
a good pitch for Miles Sanders being a almost top 5 running back this year. And that's where you should be drafting him. All right, for the 11 to 20 section, since Jordan's not here, I will take this and start us off in the conversation. Nick, you have Adam Thielen as the wide receiver 6, just as you ranked at your 19th spot. And I feel like like the Miles Sanders thing, I commend you on the cojones for putting him this high, because you're absolutely right that Adam Thielen is now the surefire only guy. Stephon Diggs is obviously no longer in Minnesota, and we've seen Thielen put up top fantasy numbers before in Minnesota. I feel like there is this, and it's not a wrong assumption, but people are very put off by the fact that they feel like Minnesota is like, they only want to run the football. They want to run the football. They want to keep the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands, similar to kind of how I feel like people feel about the 49ers. But I don't see that is necessarily true. And you certainly don't feel like that's quite as true either, since you've got Adam Thielen as a top 10 wide receiver this year.
Oh, I love this. The Vikings do want to run the ball in the zone play action scheme. You run it over and over and over, so you can run the exact same play, except do play action and then you have a really fast guy running down the field and you hit for a 75-yard touchdown. That's something I've been watching for a long time, following the Texans and Shanahan in Denver before that, and little Shanahan now in San Francisco. But what San Francisco lacks is just a competent wide receiver. The 4 healthy games that we had from Emmanuel Sanders last year showed us what just a good player in that system, even with a mediocre but dreamy quarterback, can do. And not Nick Foles. What's his name? The quarterback in Minnesota.
Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins is good enough to do play action and hit that wide receiver deep. Thielen is fast. He's a very capable wide receiver. And there was always seemingly conflict, at least for shares of the passing game between Diggs and Thielen. I don't think Diggs leaving hurts Thielen because those are long developing routes where you just have to outrun the corner, and he can do that. So I really like this rank. And yeah, Minnesota is boring because they do 2 things, but one of them is throw to their X receiver.
And this is full on Gary Kubiak this season. Gary Kubiak this is his offense, bread and butter. There's no more Stefanski. What's his first name?
Kevin
Stefanski. He's not there anymore. So this is full Gary Kubiak.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'm pretty pumped about Thielen. What we like to see is heavy usage, and sometimes even in low volume passing offenses, we can still find diamonds in the rough. A guy I think compares well to Adam Thielen is Doug Baldwin in his prime, where the Seattle passing tree was really small, but Baldwin was just gobbling up targets. With Diggs gone and then sort of replacing him with Justin Jefferson, who is basically like, he's similar to an early career Thielen. He's a slot receiving or dynamo, and Thielen is the guy now who can kind of do it all. Diggs was their expert downfield guy, and Thielen is more than capable of getting downfield. So what I see is Diggs leaves behind 94 targets. I don't think Justin Jefferson is going to eat all of those. And the fact that he just ended up on the COVID list, that's another red flag. And he doesn't necessarily have it, but he's been in contact with somebody. But anyway, point being, we've seen Adam Thielen get a ton of targets. And when he does, he's like top 5 wide receiver. I think he's going to get a ton of targets. And I think that where he will be kicked out of the slot by Justin Jefferson, if Justin Jefferson's playing, he will be doing it. He will get out of the slot to go play on the outside and go deep in the Stephon Diggs role. And so, okay, it'd be one thing if he was being kicked outside of the slot to go do like short field work. But what I think is going to happen is he's going to go from being in a high leverage situation in the slot to a high leverage situation of getting really far downfield targets, which is also awesome. So I just see this as kind of a can't lose situation. He did have his big injured season last year. We shouldn't forget he was destroying box scores while he was healthy. He pulled his hamstring and he came back too early and he was out for the whole season. I have a very difficult time believing he would ever do something like that again. So yeah, I see this dude as there are only a handful of guys who have a serious shot at getting 10 targets per game. 130 targets per game per season is a lot. To get into that 150, 160 mark is special, and I think that he might be able to do it this year.
Before we go to the 21 through 30 group, Nick, are you at all worried that a large portion of that 95 targets that Stephon Diggs left is going to get eaten by Kyle Rudolph?
Not at all. I think Irv Smith edges Rudolph out more than anything else. I don't know if that was a real question. I think both the tight ends averaged like 40-some targets last year, and I think
it was pretty split last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll probably keep something like that in line. I don't think Rudolph has a whole lot left in the tank, and his contract is one of those we'll pay you now, and we can cut you at any time. That being said, I think Irv Smith could end up being the number 2 receiver on the team, like target wise.
Yeah. So that was a shot at me. Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
And those 95 targets, I think, are largely going to go away. They're going to run the ball more. I think that we had that many targets for Diggs because he was just so talented that you don't want to waste a person like that. But what we've seen out of Shanahan and Kubiak and little Shanahan now is there's an X wide receiver and there's a really competent pass catching tight end. And then your running back just dominates absolutely everything. So maybe the 95 won't go away, but I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota had 50, 55 fewer passing attempts this year.
That's fair. All right, so the 21 through 30 segment, and this is like you've alluded to this many times, Nick, that stack all your running backs early, wait for the receivers because there's so many, and this is the first big chunk of receivers that you've got here. This has Juju Smith-Schuster, who you got wide receiver 8, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 9, Allen Robinson, wide receiver 10, Kenny Golladay, 11, DJ Moore, 12, Odell Beckham, 13, and DeAndre Hopkins, 14. And those are all right in a row. We've talked on this show before about reservations of DeAndre Hopkins' transition, both learning a new offense, and we've seen it in the past that wide receivers, big name wide receivers who've made the change, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be super stud fantasy wide receivers. But you seem especially low on DeAndre Hopkins, having him wide receiver 14 this year.
Yeah, the evidence to support the narrative that it's very difficult for a receiver to change teams in the same offseason and then go perform in the next season. It is seemingly there. I think that there are exceptions, and I think that that's one of those things that's still developing, similar to the like pass rush versus pass coverage kind of a thing. But the system that this team wants to run is 4 wide. I mean, not every play, but they want to lead the league with that. So we're looking at Christian Kirk, we're looking at Larry Fitzgerald. I'm not high on Larry Fitzgerald, but he's still going to get a lot more work than most third receivers would on a team. I think as far as the fourth receiver goes, they got a ton of different guys that they can plug in there. But, Hopkins is going to be competing with an established wide receiver duo. This team is a very good rushing team. I think that they will run the ball a lot, and I think that they will throw to their running back a lot, similar to what Clark was saying with the Dalvin Cook situation or the Minnesota situation overall. And just given how awesome everyone else's situations are in that group ahead of him, I just don't feel bad putting him at the back end of that tier.
So full disclosure, I own one NFL jersey, and it is a DeAndre Hopkins jersey. So take everything I'm about to say with a big old grain of salt. DeAndre Hopkins is still my wide receiver 2 this year. I've done my top 25, and he's in there. He is amazing. Half of his good plays get called back for holding, and then you never see him because the Texans aren't good. And Kylo Murray showed enough last year for us to believe like he's good, and the Cardinals suck, and they're going to be behind a lot. And even if not, he has no problems just throwing the ball to the receiver that's supposed to get the ball. You see him make some pretty bad decisions, but he's throwing it to guys like Larry Fitzgerald who make it work. And I think that DeAndre Hopkins can make it work too. It's the unknown. I have to be fair here and say a lot of good wide receivers that have gone to other teams haven't really performed well. But I'd also make the argument is it feels like a lot of those good wide receivers are kind of diva wide receivers, which is kind of the antithesis of what DeAndre Hopkins has been for his entire career. So I think he moves into like absolute dominant number 1 status there, but you got to rank guys where you think they're going to go. So give you the A for effort of putting Hopkins in essentially a do not draft position.
Clark, take us into 30 through 40.
So there are a lot of really good guys here, and I'm kind of, I don't know, I always seem to be on the other side of what folks are thinking of doing. I went RB heavy last year when everybody was doing 0 RB, and everybody's saying RB heavy early this year, and I feel like it's a great year to wait on running back. But there's guys like in this range of Melvin Gordon, and I don't know how he's not a great running back 1 for you. He may be competing with what's his face down there,
Phillip Lindsay.
Thank you. But they paid him a lot of money. They're going to run. They have a second-year quarterback. I feel like Melvin Gordon's going to get a ton of volume. That's what you're betting on. But the guy I actually want to talk about, someone we haven't talked about a lot, is T.Y. Hilton, who missed a bunch of time last year. And I think that's why no one remembers him, because he's not on that first page of wide receivers when you look at last year's scorecard. I think Phillip Rivers is a much better quarterback today than Jacoby Brissett was last year. Frank Reich, missing T.Y. Hilton all year, and with Jacoby Brissett as his quarterback, still had the Colts as number 16 in the league in scoring offense. And so imagine what he could do with a competent quarterback. I don't think Phillip Rivers is great, but I think he's pretty good. And I think the Chargers are going to see that this year, and I think we're going to see that in Indy. T.Y. Hilton is going this late. I just did a dynasty startup a little while ago, and people have forgotten about him. T.Y. Hilton's a very good wide receiver, and we have seen zero trouble with Phillip Rivers focusing on one or two guys in the offense. There's just nobody else there. There's a couple of young guys who might step up, but Hilton is an absolute stud wide receiver, and he's going way too late.
Yeah, he's a great one, Clark, because he falls under that, like, was part injured last year, was playing in an offense that people aren't really looking at or paying attention to. And so I think he has a perfect spot where you have him as a wide receiver too, Nick, and I think he could be a wide receiver one, or certainly at least flirt with that on a consistent, regular basis. And you're getting him wide receiver 17. Like that's huge value there in my book.
Yeah. So you said I got him as wide receiver 17. Yeah. He would have been lower on my list had Roto World not retweeted the offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni's comments, stating that they wanted him to get back to his 2018 form in 2018. This is from the piece. He had 120 targets, caught 76 of them, 1,270 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's their ideal for what he can do. If we compare the rosters, they were running with Ryan Grant, Chester Rogers, and Ebron as their pass catching group. I think it's stronger this year. I think Paris Campbell is going to break out this year. I think Michael Pittman is a fine rookie. I still think, though, that the 120 target range is reasonable for him, which is why I like him as a mid-tier wide receiver too. I don't think that he's going to clear that next. I mean, 120 is good. He's just been banged up. Frankly, the injuries were what initially made me want to put him lower. But the fact that the coaching staff has endorsed him as, they want him to be the head and shoulders above the group target guy, but still only be in that 120 range. I like him as a receiver too.
But this is so this year, with everybody going so hot and heavy on running backs early, T.Y. Hilton is in a great position to be your third pass catcher, and to you just build an absolutely dominant squad, except for running back, and you just have to bet on things becoming available. And no position has more opportunity come available every year than running back. So that's
fair. Yeah.
And that's actually a perfect segue, Clark, because as we move into the 41 through 50 section of Nick's thing, there are three running backs at the top of this who I feel like are guys who Nick has as RB2s, but all have, in my book at least, RB1 potential. And if I went heavy at wide receiver, or I went, RB to start and then wide receiver, tight end, and these guys are sitting there in like the 4th or 5th round, I wouldn't be mad taking them as an RB2. So, Nick, my question to you is, you got Mark Ingram, RB17 at the top, Todd Gurley, RB18, Chris Carson, RB19. Which of those three do you see as the guy who you think has the biggest potential to kind of outplay where you currently have them?
I mean, they all have their issues. So the thing to note here is that I'm like a full round behind ADP on at least one of these guys, and more in another case. So I think for me, it's probably the guy that I want is Mark Ingram, just because I like the system. But I do think Dobbins will be nibbing at his heels. Gurley, I don't trust to be healthy for a full season. And Carson, he's been real banged up. He's supposed to be healthy to start the year, but he has had fumbling issues. So this is a group I just don't think I'll end up getting, because I think I'm going to be drafting receivers here.
With this group, this is where the warts for the running backs really start to come up. And one with Mark Ingram, the only wart is the guy playing behind him. And that's why, my favorite out of this group, even if he takes a huge step back from last year, he's still a solid player. And this is the range I think you look at each year, where you want to pick 2 or 3 guys from this range and just hope that one of them works out, and don't get committed to Todd Gurley playing 10 snaps and we're playing the what if game if that's what it turns out to be. Look to move him to the guy who just can't let him go. But this is a solid group of running backs here.
All right, let's get into now this bottom 50 for Nick, and we'll try to kind of rattle through these a little quickly. Clark, I know this was Jordan 51 to 60, but you want to take the lead on this section?
Yes, I have to unmute everything first. 41 to 50. Oh, no, 50 to 51, 50 to 59.
51 to 60. Yes, sorry.
Oh, sorry, guys. David Johnson jumped out to me here. He's another one of the I hate to pound the strategy that I'm probably going to go with this year, but this is the type of running back that I want to get as my running back too, and hope to hit on someone with my fab budget for my killer flex that I pick up late in the year. Bill O'Brien does some really weird stuff, but one of the things that he seems to like to do is give the ball to the less athletic running back and just pound him up the middle like 300 times a year. And it looks like it's going to be David Johnson doing that this year. Even though David Johnson can catch the ball, and hopefully Deshaun Watson will just decide that he's going to run the offense his way and pass to David Johnson a little bit, but I think Johnson's a huge value this year. He is extremely boring. He is like Carlos Hyde for the past 2 years. He's going to be well overlooked, but I think he's going to be a solid performer where he's going to start and you're going to feel comfortable week 6 rolling David Johnson out there as your RB2.
He's another guy who I like. I agree with you, Clark, as like if I end up with him as my RB2, there's risk, but there's also enough upside there that I'm willing to, because I've waited on RB and because I've stacked at receiver. But Nick, clearly we know that that's not your motto.
Yeah, I just don't think this is a very good team fit for David Johnson. Like you were saying, Clark, Bill O'Brien wants to run him north-south, and that's just never been something that he was good at. Now with like multiple back injuries, and I got 2 of those going on right now, and I don't know how anyone ever gets through these things. But again, he is such a talented receiver. I have not seen Bill O'Brien really utilize his running backs through the passing game, and scrambling quarterbacks also tend to take away the dump off opportunities by bolting. But ultimately, the guys that I'm going to be trying to take that are going to actually at this ADP are guys like AJ Green, Terry McLaurin, Juju, incredibly, fantasy football calculator for whatever that's worth, or Hollywood Brown. So this will just be, hey, it's great if we're in the same league because you can have them.
61 through 70. Nick, I have given you one spot to go wild with and to start our conversation. And I picked this because I've just randomly decided that in the middle of it, roughly, should be where you go. So what do you got for 60 to 70 or 61 to 70? Well,
I guess
other than more Deontay Johnson praise.
Yeah, we won't go there. Here's the tough thing. I think I don't think Raheem Mostert is the guy to draft. His ADP is just flying up lists now. Kyle Shanahan loves Tevin Coleman. He loves Tevin Coleman. Jeff Wilson has been on this roster for years. Reports are coming out that Jerick McKinnon's ACL is fully recovered and that his knee is going really well. He wants to do a committee. I just don't see Raheem Mostert Raheem handling a full real workload. And again, it's the Shanahan offense. And if you get 12 carries in it, then that's real valuable. But ADP wise, he's going in like the 4th round, 5th round. I've got him down here in the doldrums of like the 7th round, because I just don't think that drafting a guy who may be the lead back in a platoon is worthy of, taking over James Conner or Calvin Ridley. There's just no way I'm going anywhere near that. I don't know about you guys. And if you have any thoughts on AJ Green, please, because that's the other guy that he's really interesting to me. So take either one of those two.
Raheem Mostert, I 100% agree with you that I am just in the exact same way that Sean McVay has set this Rams backfield up to play the hot hand. I'm not touching a 49ers back except for Tevin Coleman, because I do think that Tevin Coleman routinely always gets work no matter what, and he's going so much later that the value is there. You're right, the Raheem Mostert is just rocketing up draft boards and getting way too expensive for me. I love AJ Green, and I will love AJ Green till my dying days.
Yeah, AJ Green's hurt me a lot the past couple of years, and I try not to carry that over into the next season, because that's just bad analysis and you're just setting yourself up for failure when you do that. But real analysis is the Bengals are bad, and they have been really bad. They really earned that number 1 draft pick, and it is easy to get excited about rookie quarterbacks, but it is so rare for them to really do well. There's exceptions, but I don't want to bet my fantasy season on it, especially not even at this part of the draft, which I wouldn't argue too hard against any 6th or 7th round pick. I mean, ADP is going to look so stupid 2 weeks into the season. If you like someone, you should take them. But I'm just not going to have any AJ Green on my team this year. And I'm excited for the running backs in San Francisco, but it's turning into for different reasons, a bit of a New England backfield situation where I want to take the cheaper guy that I feel like the coach likes better. And that's obviously Tevin Coleman, and you just saved me talking about him for the next group of players. I also love that you have Leonard Fournette so far down in your ranks, Nick. Good job. You're definitely
Leonard Fournette, for everyone at home, ranked 68 RB 27 according to Nick. And I think, do we have a beer bet? No, we don't have a beer bet on Leonard Fournette. Or do we have? We might have one, and I don't have it tracked. But I think
we did last year.
Do we have one last year?
Yeah, I was super high on him because DiFilippo was in town.
He
just chucks it to running backs on first day. He had 100 targets last year.
Leonard Fournette's target load is, it's going to decrease, but damn, that thing was incredible to witness.
Yeah.
Yep. You have Deshaun Jackson here at 62 also. I'm going to start Deshaun Jackson every game he's healthy. The Eagles still have no wide receivers. I don't think so. They have some guys that may prove some things this year, but every game that Deshaun Jackson plays, he's in.
Clark, take us into the 71 to 80 range.
Yeah, so there are a lot of running backs that I'd love to take shots at here. And we talked about Sean McVay earlier. I don't believe what he's saying for 1 second. I think that he didn't like any of his running backs last year and showed that. I think that he runs a really simplified offense because he has a quarterback that can't handle running a simple offense and whispers into his ear until there's 15 seconds left on the play clock. So I don't think he's going to have any problems telling this incredibly hyper-athletic second-round draft pick that they took, hey, you're running left off tackle this play. Get out there and be somebody. So I would love to take a shot on a guy like Cam Akers in this spot. I think he's flying a little bit under the radar, and it may take a couple of weeks for this to work out. But we've seen Malcolm Brown. He's a little bit less than fine. They don't have much else on the roster. This committee stuff is just – that's just making it so that when you start your rookie, you can say, well, I'll give everybody a fair shot. I think this is Cam Akers' job to win, and I love taking him late.
So had there been a preseason, I would be ranking Akers ahead. And he's going by ADP, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, at half-point PPR. He's going around pick number 80. The thing is, though, I think that they're going to try to keep Goff upright. And Malcolm Brown is the dude who has produced not well, but more than the other backs that are going to be in that running backs room. Darrell Henderson, they might change up their blocking scheme. He did not fit the McVay system last year. We loved him. He is similar to Akers' athletic freak, although I have to say Cam Akers' 10-yard split, which is like the speed metric that I like to use for straight line speed. He ran it. I think I have it in the piece. He ran like a 1.47. Chris Johnson was a 1.43, and Tyreek Hill is a 1.50. So like his speed is on a different kind of level. So what you were saying, Clark, they may just say, let's try to get a small hole open for him, and he just blows through it. And he very well could do that. I don't remember what I wrote up fully here, but it was probably something like he could take over midseason kind of a thing. But to start the year, I just think Malcolm Brown's going to be the one who's getting the 12 to 15 touches. And having him here, I'm probably not going to draft him, but I think he's probably the guy who starts with the job.
All right, we're almost wrapping things up. We're moving into the 81-90 range, and this is where you kind of start having, obviously, way back, and let's see if I can bring it up, way back in the just about the 50 range. You had your first two quarterbacks going, Patrick Mahomes going at 48, Lamar Jackson going at 49, and then all the way down in the 80s, we have your top four quarterbacks going after that: Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Watson. Did I say Deshaun Jackson? Yeah. I don't hate that order. We've talked a lot about Dak Prescott. We've talked a lot about Kyler Murray. We all know what Deshaun Watson is. Defend to me the fact that Josh Allen, I know he has a rushing floor, and that's a big plus. And we know that he's got now weapons with Stephon Diggs, and John Brown is great. Cole Beasley worked really well in that offense. Defend to me that Josh Allen should go ahead of Kyler Murray. I can understand. Deshaun Watson seems dubious. Talk to me, Nick.
Yeah, so I do think that this is a pick your poison situation, but Josh Allen is he's taken over Cam Newton's role in the NFL as best goal line back. He's converted. It's something like 8 of 10 attempts within the 2-yard line. His rushing floor is legit. Like this guy, you can pretty much bank him for for adding a touchdown with his legs every week. And by that, I mean just 40 yards a week kind of a thing. And he's got a very good chance of finding the end zone too. The thing that he is not good at is throwing downfield because he just has this cannon that he just blasts downfield, and it's errant. So what did they do?
I love the quarterback defense. He can run, but the one thing he's bad at is throwing the football.
He's fine in the short to intermediate area, but he is a bad downfield thrower. And so what they did was they went out and they got last year's most efficient downfield receiver in Stephon Diggs. So now what they're rolling out there is a combo of Stephon Diggs and John Brown. That is making your life easy on a quarterback. Like when it's similar to what McVay does with Goff, where Goff can't. There's certain shit that Goff can't do, and McVay does it for him. There's certain stuff that Josh Allen has shown he can't really do. That's throw downfield, even though we can throw it 60 yards. So they bring in Stephon Diggs. I just really like what this guy can do, and if he throws a pick six, unless you're in a league that penalizes pick sixes, there's like nothing better for a quarterback than throwing an early pick six because they just go in like, all right, I'm rushing or I'm chucking bombs.
This is a perennial blind spot for me when I just don't like a player and don't think that he's good. But all of the arguments you made for Josh Allen aren't saying that he's good. You're saying that he is a good fantasy quarterback. And if you're in a league that gives you 4 points per passing touchdown, an extra 40 yards rushing is a touchdown. That gives you a huge advantage over other quarterbacks. And fantasy football isn't about whose team has the best players on it. It's about scoring the most points. So I think the hype on Josh Allen's getting way out of hand. If he was like the quarterback 12 or 13, I feel like I'd be on board of being like, I know you don't like the guy, but he does put up fantasy points a la Tim Tebow. But man, this is just, I've had such a hard time with everyone deciding that Josh Allen is the next coming of Lamar Jackson, which I feel is insulting to Lamar Jackson because Lamar Jackson's actually good at playing quarterback and not just a huge rushing guy. I think I'm torn. I'm of like 3 or 4 different minds on Josh Allen.
Clark's getting split personality over Josh Allen. All right, and let's wrap up your top 100. And the guy who I just have started to fall in love with in the tail end of drafts, and you have him here at 92, wide receiver number 43, Golden Tate. I feel like not only do people overlook Golden Tate just as a human being, but also, like Clark loves to point out, players who miss time or who, were injured, or for Golden Tate was suspended, he was out for the first 4 games. Because of that large chunk of missed time, they're not going to show up when you're doing looking at first pages of stats and how things went for the season. Golden Tate, when you take the time that he was actually healthy on the Giants, he was one of super productive. And I have a hard time thinking is it crazy that I am going to say Golden Tate? I think he leads the Giants in targets without much effort. I don't see who's really challenging. I think Darius Slayton is going to take a good step. But Golden Tate, to me, seems like the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and everyone is pretty hyped that Daniel Jones is suddenly going to become a viable, quarterback. And so where is he throwing the ball if it's not Golden Tate? So I'm starting to, in all of my drafts, take Golden Tate in the 10th, 11th round as a flex option who really has, I think in my book, solid wide receiver 2 potential.
Yeah, I'm not going to draft Golden Tate terribly high just because I actually do think it's a fairly crowded receiver room there. Evan Ingram, he counts. Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Tate. I love Tate from his time in Seattle. He is a beast after the catch. I don't think that he's, Clark likes to say at a certain point in the draft, I'm not going to tell you not to draft your guy. Like there's going to be a time when, like, yeah, if you like him in the late rounds, then go take him. And I think that he kind of falls into that category for me.
Yeah, I think everything you said is true, except for this is one of the times or one of the many, many times where I'm glad I'm not on social media. Who's saying Daniel Jones is going to be really good? That's funny.
Like the general vibe, certainly from a fantasy standpoint, is because they like his rushing floor, and they think that he's going to take another step in the offense. So if he's going to take a step, who's he passing to?
He was good for. Oh, go ahead.
His schedule opens up in week 6. Just keep your eye on that.
He was good for a few games when they gave him rollouts and wide receivers, sweeping across the field with him. I don't know.
I don't agree with it.
Golden Tate's incredibly talented. I think he's absolutely the best wide receiver on that team. I think he's been the most talented wide receiver on many of his teams, and he's just a little guy, and so he kind of gets disrespected for that. One thing I certainly see from your list, Nick, here, if this holds even close to what ADP is it's quarterback time for me, because I look at this like 15 guys here. I don't want any of that. And that's about the time that I'll take a quarterback and just kind of punt. And then we start taking guys like Madison and high upside backups or other rookies who have a chance to really impress.
Unfortunately, this is me taking a stance on drafting quarterbacks late, because these guys are long gone.
Oh, I mean, not necessarily these guys, like any quarterback.
Oh,
like
okay,
I would take
gotcha.
Matt Ryan here, who's probably going late, or Phillip. Well, maybe not Phillip Rivers, but like
No, there's a ton of guys though. Like you could bet upside on Baker. You could go with.
Yeah.
I mean,
Don't leave your draft without Teddy Bridgewater.
just general draft
Nick
strategy.
Botiford.
Yeah, when you're looking at the board and think, I don't like any of these people, that's a good time to take your quarterback.
Yeah. Nope.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Only honorable mention I have to throw out there: draft Damien Williams, not Clyde.
Yeah. I think I saw something, and I want to do a deep dive into this. Andy Reid doesn't have the biggest track record of giving backs like 200 plus carries. The only time it was like, and especially rookies. I mean, I think Jamal Charles had it like once, and Brian Westbrook came in and
Jamal Charles just scored every time he touched the ball. That's why he didn't get any chances.
It's so, but at the end of the day, the running back group is going to put up points. Like everybody, like Williams and Clyde are going to do that. And Clyde has had no time to observe this play. I mean, he's reading the playbook, but
the Chiefs run a complicated playbook.
Right. There's a lot of movement, a lot of action, a lot of pre-snap stuff.
Mahomes' decision to not get his knee repaired is a pretty big deal. He's at a significantly high risk of re-injury. And I just like Damien Williams just destroys people on wheel routes. And anyway, I just don't think he's going away. I think he's getting 12 to 15 touches a game, and he's going super late. I like him a lot more.
This is an avoid backfield, even though there is so much potential here. Edwards-Helaire is going way too high. If I can get Williams in the 6th or 7th round, even though I was 100% out on him last year, 6th or 7th round for the guy who's probably going to start for KC, I would love that. Yeah. I'm with you. Take the cheaper guy.
Same thing with San Francisco. All right, so make sure you go to Fake Teams. This is going to be live, Nick's full top 100 list. And so we just touched on a couple names here and there, but you can see the whole list for yourself. Make sure you subscribe to the Fake Teams podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. That's how you'll not only get us, the RB1 podcast, but also our fantasy baseball and basketball podcast for however long baseball and basketball occur. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at RB1 Podcast. You can follow myself at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark, and Nick at Ginger_Nick without a K. Make sure you take note of that so that when you have beef with any of his top 100 rankings, you can at the shit out of them.
You can have a constructive conversation with him and
just shout vulgar words and tell him why he's wrong. Until next week. Wait, what do I normally say? Peace.